I always tell my clients, if your partner is not running back to you, or if you feel like reconciliation is this very difficult thing to do, then you're most likely doing it all wrong. And here's the big problem that I see. I see a lot of people scrambling quickly and trying a lot of things to save their relationship. But 9 times out of 10, I see that they're just running faster in the wrong direction. And worse, because they think they're running in the correct direction, instead of turning back, they just keep doubling down on the wrong approach over and over and over again. And to make it even worse, I see this often coupled with the wrong or low standards of what it means to be bulletproof, for example, what it means to be creating safety, for example. So I see a lot of people telling me, but Jeff, I've been creating safety, but Jeff, I've been bulletproof. But then I look at them and I go,
you're not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy.
You're not really creating safety. You're not actually bulletproof. And then if whatever they're doing doesn't work, they just throw their hands up in the air and say, I give up. It's not working. It's impossible. But in my mind, I'm like, bro, you can't win because you've been playing in the wrong freaking sport. You've been bringing this baseball bat to a tennis match. Of course you're going to lose. So if you want to be that guy that actually runs in the correct direction, then I want you to stay tuned because I'm going to show you the 5 very important, very common paradoxes that I see people fall into. And these 5 paradoxes is really why men can be very successful in their careers and other parts of their life, but they struggle for all their life sometimes on the relationship and the softer and this more abstract side of life. And once you understand these 5 paradoxes, you will see what my clients mean when they tell you that once you join the program and once you understand these 5 paradoxes, reconciliation becomes so freaking easy. So let's start with a bang with paradox number 1, what we call the paradox of logic. And this paradox is when you try to explain to your partner your changes, try to explain them your side, but in doing so, actually just prove to your partner that you haven't really changed at all. So let me give you 3 examples here. The first one happened a couple of weeks ago. We had a client whose partner was saying to him, hey, I'm tired of you saying that you understand. This problem has been a problem for a while now, and I need you to stop telling me you understand how I feel and just freaking fix the problem. And so he's trying to show his partner that he's a more understanding guy. He's changed guy. So what did he say? He says, I understand how upset you feel right now. He was thinking that him saying I understand and using I understand as a script was doing the correct thing, was actually creating safety, but actually he was destroying even more safety because he was just showing his partner that like, dude, did you not just hear what I freaking just said? Is that I'm tired of you saying you understand. I'm tired of you understanding me. Another example of this one, I see people trying to show their changes because they think that showing their changes creates safety, or they're writing letters to avoid divorce, for example, but not realizing that you writing letters to avoid divorce or you just showing your changes after days or weeks is only going to show your partner your immaturity and maybe even a lack of awareness of how deep your changes needs to go or how deep the problem actually runs. A final example of this that is really common is when people try to solve their partner's problems. So they would think in their mind, right? Okay, my partner comes to me with a problem. If I solve the problem, then I am establishing myself as the alpha, as the problem solver, as the fixer. And that, of course, makes her feel safer. But actually, what it does subconsciously is it kind of signals to your partner here that you cannot solve your problems on your own. So you need me to solve your problems for you. And it actually can subconsciously belittle your partner even more. And there are a lot of other ways that people can fall into the paradox of logic. And it's the paradox that's actually the sneakiest of the paradoxes that we're going to discuss today. For example, this commenter thinks that by saying this, by thinking this, that's actually going to make him look and appear more valuable, but it actually makes him look less valuable. It actually makes him look a lot more childish, a lot more juvenile. And, if I was his partner looking at this comment, I think I'll be looking at this comment and thinking, I'm glad I'm leaving his ass. You can see how this can put you in a cycle where you think you're doing the correct things and going in the correct direction, but actually you're running faster in the wrong direction. And we have to remember here that there's an interplay between your conscious mind and your subconscious mind. So a good way to understand this is what I teach my clients, where there's different levels of being bulletproof, for example. So level 1 is, of course, you being fragile. Number 2 is when you still need to tell yourself to not be angry, to calm down, to keep your shit together. Because if you're consciously telling yourself to keep your shit together, then you're also subconsciously admitting that you don't have your shit together. And then the 3rd level is when you're so calm, you're so not angry as a being that you don't even need to tell yourself to calm down. You don't even need to tell yourself to not be angry anymore. Know that whenever you admit something, you say something consciously, you're also creating a statement subconsciously. And so the paradox of logic happens when whatever you say, whatever you do, tackles directly to this conscious level on your partner's mind, but it doesn't really tackle this subconscious level. And to tackle this subconscious level requires a different type of communication, different style of communication. And this is really the danger with a lot of approaches out there, is that they tell you to write letters. They tell you to make promises what to say and do. And these methods, right, they only touch on the conscious game, but they never really touch on the subconscious game. So for my clients in my program, they understand not only how to not fall into the paradox of logic, but also how to play on the subconscious level. So for example, we teach our clients to plant what we call implicit seeds, where, like we discussed in the previous video, we don't really want to talk about the divorce. We don't really want to talk about the relationship directly per se, but we want to make it about you and her versus the problem, which is our unhappiness. So I'll link to you to that previous video down below if you missed that video. But they also know how to pair these implicit seeds with what we call explicit seeds. But these explicit seeds are very planted in a very organic way, where it's very native to the conversation, where the partner doesn't even understand that they're trying to plant seeds. So if you want to see some examples of this, I have a 2-hour group call that I shared with the community, where in a group call, I show you a lot of different ways that I can plant both this implicit but also explicit seeds as well in a very organic way. But I'll show you some screenshots here as well of other clients who have tried this and really have their partner gravitate towards them naturally without them even trying to address or avoid divorce directly. And when you really learn to communicate with people on this very subconscious level and affect them on their subconscious level, that is when you really unlock the secrets to really creating a conversation style that actually connects with your partner very deeply. And the next one is something that many of you have heard before if you've followed my channel for quite a while, as the falling and striving paradox. So when you try to directly create safety, so the 5 pillars like emotional safety and all these pillars, when you try to directly create it, you actually end up pushing further away from creating safety, from trust, from reconciliation, etc. And I know I use this example a lot, but think of this like sleeping. If you're trying to fall asleep, the more willpower you exert to falling asleep, the less likely you are to fall asleep. So some examples of this. I see some people who learn the concept of creating safety and they say to their partner, right, hey, you can feel safe talking to me. So they think that by them saying you can feel safe, that their partner will feel safe and share, that actually creates more guilt in their partner and actually makes them feel less safe than before. Another example of this is sometimes people also guilt trip their partner to feeling safer with them. So they might say, for example, hey, good couples, they're good at communication. Let me send you this book about communication because we need to learn how to communicate better. You need to learn how to communicate better. And they think that this actually creates more safety, but you can see how this actually destroys more safety because, again, it's just going to make it much harder for them to want to share. Another one is when you're trying to talk about divorce or avoiding divorce directly. And we talked about this in a previous video too. So you might think that trying to avoid divorce, trying to talk about divorce actually prevents divorce, but actually it brings you closer to divorce because it just shows just how much more selfish you are. Because again, reconciliation is fundamentally a very selfish act. So there are a lot of other ways that people fall into this falling versus striving paradox. But again, we have to remember that they call it falling in love for a reason, because love is very much a falling game. Emotions are very much a falling game as well. And falling games require falling processes. So this brings me to, again, the dangers of a lot of approaches out there that I see is that they are all about writing letters. They're all about making promises of what to do and say. They're really trying to use a striving approach to win a falling game. And again, you're just bringing a baseball bat to a freaking tennis match. It's just not going to work. So what a lot of my clients do is that they just learn how to win the falling game. So in the previous video too, we talk about the 4 ingredients to surrender, and all we're focused on is just reestablish the correct environment. So all these 5 pillars right here, and just watch your partner and the relationship grow and blossom. And because they learn this falling approach, they actually learn how to reconcile a lot faster. So I've been, kind of mislabeled, I would say, as the guy who only focuses on the long-term changes. But then people always say, but what about the short term? I need some quick fix now. Well, those quick fixes, logically, it seems like it actually puts you in the correct direction now. It actually puts you in the wrong direction faster. So I always tell my clients the best way to win in the short term is by focusing on the long-term processes. Because again, this is very much a falling game. It's a very different beast altogether. So you're going to encounter a lot of coaches, a lot of programs, a lot of things that will just get you to FOMO into their approach. Do not fall for the biggest scam in the industry right now, guys. Guys, let's be honest. There's a lot of bad relationship advice out there. Advice that often sounds really great on the surface, but when a lot of my clients run to these programs and they follow these great sounding techniques, it actually makes things worse for them. And that is why I do what I do. And for the last 10 years, I've made it my mission to cut through the mountains of bullshit that is out there and show you how the real pros do it. And not only have I lived this myself, I've walked this path, but I've also let thousands of my clients walk through the same path, and often when their situation feels extremely dire and hope is long gone. And if I were to guess, if you're watching this video, your family, your marriage, your relationship means a lot to you right now. And I agree. There's nothing in my life that is more important than my relationship with my close ones. So if this resonates, click subscribe, hit the bell button as well, and share this with someone who needs it. And join me in my mission to make marriages and relationships great again. Let's fucking go, guys. And number 3 is something that we rarely talk about. And it's one that a lot of people miss because nobody really talks about it. And it's what I call the lack of safety paradox. And this really explains why so many men are so blindsided by their breakdown of the relationship, by their partner wanting divorce. And you probably never know you lack safety until it's too late. And it goes back to the tenet of, if you lack emotional safety, the hard part is that it's really hard for you to actually understand that you lack safety, that you have destroyed safety, because there's no safety to actually tell you about it. There was a time, for example, in my own life when, my partner used to start off by criticizing me a lot. And at some point, she actually stopped criticizing me. And when she stopped criticizing me, I thought that that meant that I had improved, that she wasn't mad at me anymore, that she was actually pretty happy with me. And so I took that lack of feedback as a confirmation that I was doing well. But actually, that lack of feedback actually meant that she didn't feel safe with me. So it was actually the exact opposite. It's not because I was doing well, but because I was doing even worse. I was doing really terrible. And this also explains why in this industry, in this niche, I find that a lot of people are often wrongfully certain and they're really blind to how wrong they actually are. And so they're running in the wrong direction and they don't even know it. And they just keep doubling down on the wrong approaches, the wrong strategies. Because again, right, just like my example there, I thought the lack of feedback was actually a sign that I was doing well. So I was doubling down on whatever I was doing back then, but actually it was a signal that I was doing really bad. But I was so blind to it because nobody had enough safety to tell me what was going on. People who actually follow my program, they don't get confused like this. They actually say these things, right? So I'm going to let you pause here and look at what a lot of my people in my program say in the YouTube comments, because if you truly understand how to create safety, if you truly understand what it means to be bulletproof, you would realize that it's just like dieting and exercising. If you do it right, there is no way it doesn't really work. It's breaking the laws of nature at that point if it doesn't work. And it really reminds me of this Dunning-Kruger effect, right? The people at the peak of Mount Stupid are the people who are most certain, who are most confident about their own skills, about their own abilities. So the paradox here with this paradox of safety is that, the more stupid you are, the more you destroy safety. The more you destroy safety, the less feedback you get. The less feedback you get, the more wrongfully certain you think you are. And the more wrongfully certain you think you are, the higher you go on Mount Stupid here. Like, I'm going to highlight this comment, for example. And he says, all your advice is based on the false premise that your wife is a good, honest person. So he doesn't see there, right? The fundamental attribution error, the equal blame illusion, the good enough illusion, perfect illusion, the unique circumstance illusion, all these victim mindsets that's rolled into one, all these mind viruses roll into one comment. And the thing is, like, he is so convinced that he doesn't have any issues. So again, the more stupid you are, the more you destroy safety. Like, think about how this guy is destroying safety with this kind of mindset. And the more you destroy safety, the less feedback you get. Nobody really wants to respond to this guy. His partner probably doesn't want anything to do with him anymore, doesn't even bother giving him feedback anymore. And the less feedback you get, the more wrongfully certain you are. This guy will always forever just keep thinking that women are shit, his partner is crap, and nothing will ever change his mind. And that's the danger of this paradox. A lot of programs, they actually say some crazy stuff because, like, even one coach, I'm not going to name names here, but one coach literally tells you to avoid bringing up difficult topics, to let your partner bring up difficult topics. And this is absurd because, like, if tougher topics are the ones that are killing your relationship and your partner is leaving because she doesn't feel safe with you, then how can you wait for your partner to bring up the difficult topics? Why would your partner bring up the difficult topics, right? And if your partner never brings up the difficult topics and you never have the difficult conversations, then how can you ever reestablish safety when those tougher topics are the ones destroying safety right now? The whole thing just doesn't make any sense. So for my clients, the first thing they do is they learn how to structure their environment to allow them to see through their blind spots. So not only do they learn internally how to antithetically think. So a lot of people hypothetically think by asking themselves, how am I right? And so on. But my clients learn how to antithetically think. I have a video on this topic before. I'll leave it up above or down below this video. But if you look at all how great thinkers think, how like great detectives, for example, how great therapists, how they ask questions. They always ask antithetic questions, not hypothetical questions. And if you are confused about this terminology, again, check out the video that I linked for you earlier. They also learn how to get rid of the victim mindsets that keep you really blind. So I have an internal shift series on this, but the more aware you are of your internal processes and the more aware you are of how this victim mindset, is mind biases, how they play, the less affected you'll be by them, right? You're not going to just be blindly believing whatever you think anymore. And the third thing, the biggest thing is really you need to surround yourself with the right environment. One of the biggest reasons why the program is so valuable is because of the antithesis given by other members, by the coaches. So once you get your environment set up, what you want to do is then learn how to create campaigns via the 7 frameworks. So the basic premise, the basic thinking here is that, yes, you can gather antis by yourself by having the right environment, but also you want to be able to have a conversation with your partner to discover more antis from the primary source, that is your partner. And you want to welcome any resistances that you get, and you will need to couple this with what we call an anti-fragile mindset, which is what we call the bulletproof vest. So it's beyond just being bulletproof, beyond just being stoic and holding your frame, as people say. This is about being anti-fragile. So it's basically just learning how to set up your internal world, but also your external world with the way you communicate to actually invite antithesis, to actually invite differing opinions. Because those antithesis, differing opinions, while they may sometimes be uncomfortable, they may sometimes hurt, they really prevent you from falling further and further down the rabbit hole of being wrongfully certain. And paradox number 4 is what we call the paradox of resistance. So in the last video, I gave you the example of my own journey, where I was perfect for 2 years and planting all the right seeds for 2 years. But my partner told me that she was seeing my changes, but she wasn't really running back to me. It wasn't until I had my hell week where everything went wrong. Plus, not only did everything go wrong, but also that was when my partner said to me, like, I'm not sure how I feel about the relationship anymore. So she was tacking on to basically kicking a dead horse at that point, right? But when she saw that I was thriving in that particular moment, in that dip, in that 1 week, when we reconciled later, she said to me, Jeff, I felt more trust for you in that 1 week, and you built more trust for me in that 1 week than you did in the last 2 years. People are very likely to give up during these dips. And sometimes people give up during these dips and don't even know they're giving up during the dips. So we all have, if you've been following on a while, you know this emotional chart, right? So you have your event, interpretations, feelings, and actions. So here we're saying, right, the event cannot determine what you feel. So here, for example, your partner is resisting you and the resistance is making you feel bad. Well, the reality is that her resistance cannot really make you feel bad. It's how you interpret that resistance that really determines how you feel. So for example, if you ask me or my clients, if I get resistance and my interpretation right now, bred from my paradigms of resistance are actually a massive opportunity, whenever I get resistance, I'm going to interpret it as, fuck yes, wonderful. This is my time to not only show my changes, but also this is finally something that has been killing the relationship for so long, finally coming up to the surface. And now that it comes to the surface, I can do something about it, right? I can respond to it. I can turn it from negative to positive. But if it sits on the ground, I can never do so. So for me, whenever I get resistance, my interpretation is positive and my feelings about it are also positive. But if you interpret the same resistance as, oh my God, this is hopeless now, then you're going to feel negative. Same event, different interpretations, different emotions. And it's also why, if you put 100 people in the same room looking at the same things, you will get 100 wildly different emotions. Why? Because of the 100 wildly different ways they interpret that same event. So again, the event cannot cause emotions, it's your interpretations of it that does. And so what usually happens here is that when you haven't really trained or reformed your paradigms about how you see resistances, how you see the dips, when you get to the dip, that is when you will start to have this bad cycle where you get the dip, so bad outcome, you are seeing it through your bad interpretation, you feel badly and hopeless about it, your bad feelings leads to bad actions, and your bad actions leads to further worsening the problem. The worse the problem gets, the more you filter it through your same interpretations, and the cycle just keeps going and going and going, never ending. And this is when people get to the point where they're in the dip, the biggest opportunity of their life, and they tell themselves, what's the fucking point? I want to give up now, right? I'm not even attracted to her anymore. And people often cannot help but crumble and think this during the dips because of what we call the corticocentric bias. And it's basically the tendency to see whatever emotions arise up in us as a product of our neocortex, of the evolved parts of our brain, but not realizing that is actually coming from the very basal parts of our brain. So here we're saying, right, your emotions are not truth. They're not reality. They don't actually, so just because you feel hopeless about something doesn't mean that thing is hopeless. Just because you don't like something doesn't mean that thing is bad, right? You only see that thing is bad because of your paradigms and how you naturally come to interpret it, your reflexive interpretation. The problem is that a lot of people, when they're in a dip, they start to feel bad. But when they feel bad, they see their bad feelings as truth. For example, when people say, I don't want this relationship anymore. This relationship is not worth fighting for anymore. Their feelings say, this relationship is not worth fighting for anymore. But they believe that their feelings represent truth. But actually, they only think it's not worth it anymore because of how they interpret it. The same way, when I, right now, I volunteer sometimes in a golf camp, for example. And sometimes you see these kids, right? If they're doing well that week, they will love golf. But if the next week, their performance dips, they suddenly go like rage quit. I hate golf. They don't hate golf because they hate golf. They hate golf because they're sucking. They hate golf because they cannot interpret their bad performance right now. And the problem is that if you believe these voices during the dips, and if you believe that whatever you feel during the dips is reality, then the odds of you giving up during the dips is going to be very high. And the worst thing is that you're going to feel very justified and right for giving up during the dips. And you won't see any other way. Another example of this is, look at this comment right here. This person's partner probably told him that they want space, that they're not in love with them anymore. And they say, ever heard of self-respect? We men are not a toy with whom you can love or unlove whenever you want. So if that is how he chooses to react, so a lot of FAE, fundamental attribution error, EBI, for example, then yes, he's going to get this dip where his partner told him like, I don't love you anymore. And with this kind of thinking, he's never going to be able to perform. He's going to actually act worse. And it's going to be stuck in that same cycle that we discussed earlier. But if he learned to actually change the way he sees about these things, the way he feels about these things, and not just run and believe everything his feelings tells him, then he might realize that, hey, your partner telling you that she doesn't love you anymore is her actually finally being fucking honest with you. Is her actually finally having some safety with you. And if she can see that like, hey, I don't love you anymore, and you can respond to that in a very mature way. For example, when my partner told me that she doesn't love me anymore, what I said to her was, hey, Sam, like, I realize this, right? I realize that you only have one life, and it's a big ask for me to ask you to spend your one and only life with me. And so I don't want you to force yourself to stay if you feel like you don't love me anymore. But I feel like right now, I think my responsibility is to really understand what I did or what needs to be done differently for, to lead you from loving me so much in the beginning to now not loving me at all, saying you don't love me anymore. I must have done something wrong there. So you tell me, you had the courage of telling me how you feel. I want to have the courage of also leaning into your courage to understand what I can do as well. So if you can say something like that, you just turn this negative moment into a very positive moment. But you cannot do that if your thinking is poisoned by a lot of victim mindsets, a lot of the wrong paradigms, and if you just believe whatever you feel right now. And one last example of this, we had this client who came in and he says that he fell out of love with his partner because after his partner kind of gave birth, she became very scatterbrained. She became very absent-minded. She was not as present anymore. And this kind of continued for a couple of years after she had the baby. And all these feelings that he had about her was no longer there anymore. And so, when he first came to me, he was really upset and he said to me like, I don't think I'm attracted to her anymore. I don't think I love her anymore. She's become a different person, until I told him how to see this whole thing differently. And I told him, right, hey, do you know what happens to a woman's body when they give birth? Is that all these different hormones actually lead their brain to become more of a diffuse attention. Why is that important? Because as a mother, you need to develop your peripheral vision, your peripheral senses, because you're always going to be needing as a mother to watch the baby. And so it's very natural for women after they give birth to become more of a diffuse attention, right? To become less present, to become more like scatterbrained. But yes, the con of that is that they become less present. But the pro is that they need that to become a really good mother right now. And once he sees that, he realized that he's seeing the same event of his partner not being present, but is interpreting that same event in a completely different way that actually allowed him to feel very differently about his partner. So if you're not careful, it's very easy to become slaves of your emotions. And when you become slaves of your emotions, when the dip happens, you're naturally going to feel bad. And when you feel bad and you believe those emotions to be true, and you double down and you jerk off that emotion, you'll end up doing things that actually put you further down the trough instead of going up and using this as an opportunity that you should. For my clients, right, they learn this again via the same skills that we teach you of how to antithetically think, for example, getting rid of the VMs, creating campaigns via the 7 frameworks. And this really is the reason behind the dangers of a lot of approaches of one programmer now teaches holding your frame, for example. Holding your frame in our program is what we call a surviving approach. It's clenching your asshole to keep your shit in. It's not really an anti-fragile approach. And when you are trying to just hold your frame during this dip, if you haven't really changed your paradigms, the way you think to be anti-fragile, you're not going to see them as opportunities, and you're not going to be creative during this dips to take advantage of those dips to actually create the most trust. So please don't fall for all this bullshit about hold your frame, whatever it is. They're just keeping your shit in together. It doesn't work, guys. It'll actually backfire very hard on you. And again, guys, I understand that all this can sound very complicated right now, but as my clients here are saying in the YouTube comments, right? Once you understand how to see through these paradoxes, once you understand the principles behind these processes a lot deeper, you realize just how simple they are and how life-changing they are. But you do have to allow yourself to get the extra step of actually seeing it for what they are. Guys, unless you've been living under a rock, you'll know that this is what I call the dark ages of relationship advice. I've been seeing so many more coaches pop up recently, giving advice that sounds amazing on the surface, but actually puts you totally in the wrong direction. And I've seen hundreds of my clients come to my program limping and wounded from after joining these other programs, because these other programs, what they teach sounds great. What they teach sounds amazing, but it doesn't really work. And not only that, it actually puts you in the wrong direction. So guys, I've made it my life's mission for the last 10 years and probably for the next many decades to cut through so much of this bullshit, because I was one of those guys who believed that same bullshit. And my relationship was in the rocks for the first many years with my wife. And that also led me to destroy so many of my relationships. And I didn't even know I was destroying it. So I am doing what I do, not because of money, but because I really want to show you guys the path and the roadmap that I've used to take my relationship to that incredible levels, but also the same process, the same roadmap that I've shown thousands of my clients to show them how the pros actually do it. So if I could give myself some advice back then, I would tell myself, stop playing around. Click the link, watch the masterclass. It's free, doesn't cost you anything. And at the end of the masterclass, if what you hear resonates with you, I'll show you how to apply for the program if you're interested in doing so. And I'm so excited to see more of you join my mission to cut through the BS and make marriages great again. And the fifth and final paradox, or what I call the script paradox. And really the paradox here is that, people often think that trust and safety is built by what you do and say. But actually, what you do and say matters very little. So for example, okay, let's do a thought experiment here. Imagine there's a device that you can implant in your brain or put in your ear. And this device can tell you what to say, what to do. And all you got to do is just say or do what the device tells you to say or do. And let's say that your partner found out that you had this device in your brain. Would your partner feel safe and be able to trust in anything that you say and do? Usually the answer is no, because your partner knows it's not you saying and doing those things, is the machine, AI, telling you to say and do those things. So this thought experiment really shows you that there is a deeper consciousness. There is something behind what you do and say that trust is built upon. Trust is not built upon what you do and say. Trust is built upon the consciousness that lies behind what you do and say. What you do and say can only work in building trust, the safety, the 5 pillars, whatever it is, only when what you do and say is also congruent or feels congruent with the consciousness behind it as well. So the danger with a lot of programs that I see out there is that, again, they only touch on what to do and say, but they don't focus on the deeper, the consciousness behind the what to do and say that really it's more important for you to work on for what you do and say to even sound genuine in the first place. And recently we've been getting a massive exodus from these programs to only focus on what to do and say, because, what usually happens and how my clients describe it is that, let's say you have this sword, right? Learning what to do and say without making the internal shifts is like giving someone a sword without teaching them how to use it. So if you make a strike, sure, a broken clock strikes right twice a day. Sometimes, rarely, it works, right? But more often than not, you're going to end up cutting yourself and making everything just much worse. So for my clients, what we do is we actually teach people what to say and do much later. We do give people what we call the TTH script, treating the hemorrhage script. And it's a framework that tells people how to conduct conversations while their change is in progress. So basically, we teach the frameworks later on, but we give it a TTH much earlier to hold them over while they're making their changes. But the priority right now for a lot of my clients is that before you learn how to dance in these conversations, really make sure that you understand how to make the internal shifts. Because if you learn what to do and say before making the internal shifts, what you do and say will work sometimes, but more often than not, it will just cause more havoc. So guys, if you find that helpful and you want to learn more about these paradoxes and how you can make the process of reconciliation actually much easier for you, so instead of going against the current, you're actually going with the current of how this reconciliation actually works, then join me in my masterclass under 5 proven steps to rebuilding your relationship from the ground up. In that masterclass, I'll show you all the exact steps that my clients use to get from ground zero to where they are today. At the end of the masterclass, I'll show you how to apply for the program also if you're interested in doing so. But for now, guys, I hope that was helpful for you guys, and I'll see you in the next video.